What's up, guys? If you want to follow the most interesting and exciting crime stories, I ask you to subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications button to receive a new story every day. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like.
In the remote city of Havenwood, nestled deep within the rugged mountains, Detective Sarah Lawson drove along the winding road that led into town. The landscape outside her window was a mosaic of autumnal hues, crimson, gold, and rust, creating a picturesque if misleading contrast to the darkness she was about to confront. Havenwood, once a haven of tranquility, now bore the scars of recent violent disturbances that had unsettled its otherwise peaceful community. Sarah's arrival was marked by an eerie stillness. The air was thick with a palpable sense of unease. She noticed the town's residents casting furtive glances her way, their faces etched with a blend of apprehension and hope. It was clear that her presence was both a relief and a cause for further anxiety. Her phone buzzed with a message from Chief David Carter. "Meet me at the old station. We need to go over the details." The old police station, a modest brick building that had seen better days, stood at the edge of the town square. As Sarah walked in, she was greeted by Chief Carter, a burly man with a grim expression that seemed to reflect the gravity of the situation. His eyes were tired, and his uniform was slightly disheveled, a sign of the relentless strain the recent cases had placed on him. "Detective Lawson," Carter began extending a hand. "Thanks for coming. We're in a rough spot?" Sarah shook his hand firmly. "What's the situation?" Carter led her to a cluttered office at the back of the station, where a large corkboard displayed photographs, maps, and notes pinned with colorful pushpins. The centerpiece of the board was a series of crime scene photos, each showing a victim with a cryptic symbol carved into their skin. "Here's what we've got," Carter said, gesturing to the board. "Over the past month, we've had 3 murders. Each victim was found with this symbol. No connections between them, no obvious suspects. It's like a ghost is behind this." Sarah examined the symbol closely. It was a complex, intertwined design, almost resembling a forgotten runic language. "Do we have any idea what this symbol means?" Carter shook his head. "No one's come up with anything concrete. We've consulted with experts, but nothing matches up. The victims didn't seem to have any apparent ties to each other or to anyone who would want to harm them." Sarah looked around at the evidence. "What can you tell me about the victims? Any commonalities or notable details?" "Not much," Carter said. "They were all ordinary people. A school teacher, a mechanic, and a librarian. All well-liked, no known enemies. The only thing we've been able to piece together is that they all had some minor interactions with local businesses, but nothing that would suggest a motive for murder." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through potential leads and theories. "I'll need to visit the crime scenes and speak with anyone who might have seen something unusual." Carter looked relieved. "I'm glad you're here. I hope you can find something we've missed." As Sarah left the station, she could feel the weight of the town's silence pressing down on her. Havenwood's serene facade belied the turmoil lurking beneath. She was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant delving into the town's darkest secrets. The investigation was just beginning, and Sarah knew that solving these crimes would require more than just unraveling the symbol. It would demand uncovering the hidden threads that connected the victims and unmasking the shadows that had fallen over Havenwood. The sun dipped below the horizon as Detective Sarah Lawson arrived at the scene of the latest murder. The park where the body had been discovered was bathed in the dim light of street lamps, casting long shadows over the fallen leaves. The autumn chill in the air seemed to carry a sense of foreboding. Sarah's breath formed small clouds as she approached the crime scene, marked by police tape fluttering in the breeze. The victim, identified as Emily Parker, a local school teacher, lay beneath the ancient oak tree. Her body was meticulously positioned, with the symbol carved into her skin prominently displayed. The sight was disturbing, and the air was thick with the stench of death and decay. Sarah took a deep breath and began her examination. As she surveyed the area, her eyes caught something unusual. A small piece of fabric, snagged on a low-hanging branch of the oak tree, fluttered gently. Sarah carefully extracted the fragment, noting its vibrant color and intricate pattern. It appeared to be from a garment, but it was not something worn by the locals. She placed the fabric into an evidence bag, her mind racing with possibilities. Detective Lawson turned her attention to the forensic team, who were busy collecting samples and photographing the scene. "Anything unusual?" she asked one of the officers. The officer, a young man named James, shook his head. Nothing out of the ordinary, detective. No signs of forced entry or struggle. The symbol is consistent with the others, but no new leads. Sarah frowned. What about witnesses? Anyone see or hear anything? James consulted his notes. We've canvassed the area. A few people reported hearing something late at night, but nothing specific. The park's usually quiet after dark. Sarah's frustration was mounting. The lack of concrete leads was frustrating, but she knew she had to press on. She decided to start by interviewing the victim's colleagues and students the next morning. As she left the park, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something significant about the piece of fabric she'd found. Back at the station, Sarah instructed the lab team to analyze the fabric fragment. She also requested information on the other victim's clothing, hoping to find any connection. Her phone buzzed with a message from Chief Carter. We've scheduled interviews with Emily Parker's colleagues and students. Let me know if you need anything. The next day, Sarah met with Emily's colleagues and students at the local school. The interviews yielded little useful information. Emily was well-liked and had no known enemies. Her colleagues described her as dedicated and passionate about teaching. Her students spoke highly of her, but none reported any unusual behavior or threats. One of the students mentioned that Emily had recently been involved in a community project, helping to organize a charity event. Sarah made a note to look into this connection, wondering if it could provide a clue. Later that evening, as Sarah reviewed her notes, she received a call from the lab. The analysis of the fabric was complete. It was identified as part of a high-end custom-made suit. The type of fabric was rare and expensive, suggesting that the wearer was likely affluent. Sarah pondered the implications. The connection to a potentially wealthy individual could change the direction of the investigation. She made a decision to delve deeper into the local business community, starting with Robert Green, a prominent businessman who had recently come up in her research. As she prepared for her next steps, Sarah felt the weight of the investigation pressing down on her. The symbol, the fabric, and the emerging connections pointed to a web of deceit and hidden agendas. The truth was out there, and she was determined to unravel it, no matter how deep the shadows of Havenwood reached. Sarah Lawson awoke to a crisp, overcast morning in Havenwood, her mind focused on the investigation. She had spent the previous evening reviewing notes and preparing for a deeper dive into the town's hidden secrets. Today, she planned to visit the Havenwood Public Library, hoping to uncover more about the mysterious symbol that had been haunting her. The library was a quaint two-story building with old wooden shelves crammed with books of all kinds. The musty smell of aged paper and leather-bound volumes filled the air. Mrs. Johnson, the elderly librarian, greeted Sarah with a warm yet cautious smile. "Good morning, Detective Lawson. How can I assist you today?" Mrs. Johnson asked, adjusting her glasses. "I'm looking for information on local history, particularly anything related to old symbols or folklore," Sarah replied. "I've come across a symbol in connection with a series of murders, and I need to understand its origins." Mrs. Johnson's expression grew serious. "We do have some historical records and local legends. Follow me." She led Sarah to a back room filled with archives and old manuscripts. As Sarah began sifting through dusty tomes and faded documents, her eyes fell upon an old leather-bound journal. The journal's cover was embossed with an intricate design that resembled the symbol from the crime scenes. Excitement surged through Sarah as she carefully opened the journal. The pages were filled with handwritten notes and sketches, documenting the early days of Havenwood. The author, a local historian named Thomas Reed, had written about a secret society that once thrived in the area. According to Reed, this society had practiced dark rituals and had left behind cryptic symbols to mark their presence. One entry caught Sarah's attention. Reed described a series of rituals involving a symbol that matched the one in the murders. The rituals were said to be linked to a pact made by the town's founders, a pact that promised protection in exchange for sinister deeds. Reed's writings hinted that the society's influence lingered even as the town's population grew, and the original members faded into obscurity. Sarah took photographs of the relevant pages and thanked Mrs. Johnson for her assistance. As she left the library, she couldn't shake the feeling that the journal might hold the key to unraveling the case. The idea that the murders could be linked to a long-forgotten secret society was both chilling and intriguing. Back at the station, Sarah reviewed the journal entries and cross-referenced them with her case notes. The symbols, the hidden rituals, and the pact all seemed to form a cohesive narrative. suggesting that the murders were not random, but part of a larger, darker agenda. She decided to dig deeper into the history of Havenwood and its prominent families. Robert Greene, the businessman she had previously noted, had family ties that dated back to the early days of the town. Sarah needed to understand his connections, and whether they related to the secret society mentioned in Reed's journal. As she prepared to visit Greene's office, Sarah felt a growing sense of urgency. The journal had provided a glimpse into a sinister past, but connecting it to the present would require more evidence. She hoped that her next steps would bring her closer to uncovering the truth behind the symbol and the murders. The investigation was evolving, revealing layers of hidden history and deception. Sarah was determined to follow every lead, no matter where it might lead. The shadows of Havenwood were deep and dark, but she was resolute in her quest for the truth. Sarah Lawson arrived at the scene of the second murder, a grim reminder that the town's nightmare was far from over. This time, the victim was a young mechanic named Jason Miller, found dead in his own garage. The small workshop was cluttered with tools and car parts, and the once bustling space now bore the mark of death. The garage was sealed off with police tape, and Sarah could see the forensic team at work. The body was positioned on the concrete floor, with the same ominous symbol carved into Jason's chest. The sight was both haunting and familiar, reinforcing the disturbing pattern that had emerged. Sarah approached the lead forensic investigator, Dr. Emily Lewis, who was examining the scene. "Dr. Lewis, what can you tell me?" Dr. Lewis looked up, her face a mask of concentration. "We've collected all the evidence, but the situation is much like the first murder. The symbol is identical, and there are no signs of forced entry or struggle. We're still analyzing the body for any additional clues." Sarah scanned the garage, noting the signs of Jason's recent activity. A half-finished car repair project was spread out on a workbench, and several personal items were scattered around. She wondered if Jason had been working on something that might be connected to his death. As Sarah continued her inspection, Officer James approached her with a report. "Detective Lawson, we found something interesting. Jason had a recent altercation with Robert Greene, the businessman you were looking into. It seems Greene was pressuring Jason to sell his garage." Sarah's curiosity was piqued. "Do we know what the disagreement was about?" James nodded. "From what we've gathered, Greene wanted to buy the garage for a new development project. Jason refused, which apparently led to some heated arguments. However, Greene denies any involvement in Jason's murder." Sarah noted this connection and decided it was time to question Robert Greene again. She made arrangements to meet him at his office later that day. Before leaving the scene, Sarah instructed her team to keep an eye out for any further evidence and to continue interviewing Jason's associates. At Greene's office, Sarah was greeted by the businessman's cold, calculating demeanor. Greene sat behind a large mahogany desk, his sharp suit and pristine appearance contrasting sharply with the grim reality of the investigation. He greeted Sarah with a measured smile, though his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. "Detective Lawson, I presume," Greene said, his voice smooth but guarded. "What can I do for you today?" Sarah took a seat across from him. "Mr. Greene, I'm following up on some recent developments. We've learned about your dispute with Jason Miller. Can you explain your relationship with him and the nature of your disagreement?" Greene leaned back, his expression unfazed. "Jason and I had a business disagreement. I wanted to acquire his property for a development project, but he refused to sell. I assure you, that's all there was to it. I had no reason to harm him." Sarah studied Greene carefully, noting his calm demeanor. "What can you tell me about your family's history in Havenwood? I'm interested in any connections you might have to local folklore or historical events." Greene's eyes narrowed slightly. "My family has been here for generations. We've been involved in various community projects. But as for folklore or secret societies, I'm afraid I can't be of much help. My focus is on business, not legends." Sarah thanked Greene and left his office, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. Greene's calm demeanor and denial of involvement did little to alleviate her suspicions. The connection between him and the recent murders was troubling, and she knew she needed to dig deeper. Back at the station, Sarah reviewed her notes and the details of the case. The pattern of the murders was becoming clearer, but the motive remained elusive. She hoped that further investigation into Havenwood's dark history and the ties between the victims and potential suspects would provide the breakthrough she needed. The investigation was intensifying, and Sarah was more committed than ever to uncovering the truth behind the sinister symbol and the string of murders that had shaken Havenwood to its core. The investigation into the murders in Havenwood continued to unravel, and Detective Sarah Lawson was determined to delve deeper into the town's secrets. With the connection to Robert Greene looming large, Sarah decided it was time to explore his background further. Her research led her to the Greene family's history, revealing a lineage deeply embedded in Havenwood's early development. Sarah's first stop was the town archives, where she hoped to find more information about the Greene family and their involvement in the community. The archives were located in a modest brick building that housed records of the town's past. The librarian, Mr. Roberts, a stout man with a bushy mustache, greeted Sarah as she entered. "Detective Lawson, how can I assist you today?" Mr. Roberts asked, his voice gravelly. "I'm looking into the Greene family's history," Sarah replied. "I need any records or documents related to their involvement in Havenwood's early years." Mr. Roberts nodded and led Sarah to a section of the archives filled with old records and dusty ledgers. As Sarah sifted through the files, she came across several documents detailing the Greene family's business dealings and philanthropic activities. It was clear that the Greenes had played a significant role in shaping Havenwood's growth. Among the documents, Sarah found a series of old letters and minutes from town council meetings. One letter, dated from the early 1900s, mentioned a secret society that had been influential in the town's development. The letter described how this society had made various deals and pacts to secure their influence, hinting at a possible connection to the dark rituals described in Thomas Reed's journal. Sarah's heart raced as she read through the documents. The connections between the Greene family and the secret society seemed to align with the symbol found on the victims. It was becoming increasingly clear that the murders were tied to something much deeper and more sinister than random violence. To confirm her findings, Sarah decided to visit Havenwood's Historical Society, hoping to find more information about the secret society and its activities. The Historical Society was housed in a charming old building with a collection of artifacts and exhibits showcasing the town's past. Sarah was greeted by Dr. Ellen Marks, the society's curator. "Dr. Marks, I'm investigating a series of murders in town," Sarah began. "I've come across references to a secret society that was influential in Havenwood's early history. Can you provide any additional information on this?" Dr. Marks's expression grew serious. "Ah, the old society. There were rumors about it being involved in dark practices and rituals. Most of this information is lost to time, but there are some records and oral histories that might shed light on it." Dr. Marks led Sarah to a back room filled with old books and manuscripts. She retrieved a worn, leather-bound volume that contained various accounts of the society's activities. The account spoke of rituals and ceremonies meant to ensure prosperity and protection for the town. The details were chilling, describing sacrifices and pacts made with shadowy figures. As Sarah pored over the documents, a pattern began to emerge. The secret society had promised protection and power in exchange for dark deeds. It seemed that the recent murders were a grotesque reenactment of these old rituals, perhaps carried out by someone seeking to revive or honor the society's legacy. Sarah left the Historical Society with a renewed sense of purpose. The connections between the Greene family, the secret society, and the murders were becoming clearer. She planned to confront Robert Greene once more, armed with the new information. As she reviewed her findings, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the investigation was leading her into the heart of Havenwood's darkest secrets. The murders were not just random acts of violence, but part of a twisted ritual linked to the town's past. The truth was closer than ever, and Sarah was determined to uncover it, no matter where the investigation might lead. Sarah Lawson's visit to the Historical Society had provided critical insights into the dark history of Havenwood. Armed with new evidence, she was ready to confront Robert Greene once more. Her next step was to arrange a meeting with him at his office, where she hoped to extract more information and potentially uncover his role in the ongoing murders. The office of Robert Greene was as pristine and imposing as ever. Greene greeted Sarah with a practiced smile as she entered, but this time his demeanor seemed slightly more guarded. Sarah wasted no time getting to the point. "Mr. Greene, I've come across some intriguing information regarding your family's history and its connection to a secret society that was active in Havenwood's early years," Sarah began. "This society had a reputation for performing dark rituals and making pacts. Can you explain your family's involvement?" Greene's expression shifted from polite curiosity to genuine concern. He leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah closely. "Detective Lawson, I've told you before that my focus is on business. not on ancient legends. My family's involvement in such matters is purely historical." Sarah didn't miss a beat. The records suggest otherwise. There were mentions of rituals and symbols that match those found at the crime scenes. It's becoming clear that the murders are tied to these old practices. "What can you tell me about this?" Green's face darkened, and he appeared to struggle with his words. "Look, there are family secrets, but they're not as sinister as you might think. My ancestors were part of many influential groups, but the past is the past. I don't have any involvement with these so-called rituals." Sarah could see that Green was hiding something. "If you're truly uninvolved, then why the evasiveness? The evidence points to a connection between your family and these crimes." Green's demeanor hardened. "I assure you, Detective, my only interest is in the future of Havenwood. If there's something in my family's past that bothers you, it's not something I can change. I suggest you focus on finding the real killer." Sarah left Green's office with a mix of frustration and determination. His reaction only strengthened her belief that he was concealing something. The next step in her investigation was to follow up on the new leads from the Historical Society's records. Sarah decided to revisit the scene of the first murder and carefully re-examine the area. She hoped that a fresh look might reveal something previously overlooked. As she walked through the park where Emily Parker had been found, her mind was filled with the details from the historical records. The symbol, the ritualistic elements, it all pointed to something deeply ingrained in Havenwood's history. While inspecting the park, Sarah noticed a small hidden alcove behind a row of dense bushes. She hadn't seen it before. Curiosity piqued, she pushed aside the branches and stepped into the alcove. To her surprise, she found a weathered stone pedestal with an inscription that matched the symbol from the crime scenes. The pedestal was partially covered in grime, but Sarah could make out the faint outline of the symbol. She carefully brushed off the dirt and took photographs of the pedestal and its inscription. It was clear that this was a significant find, possibly related to the rituals mentioned in the historical records. Sarah's next move was to consult with Dr. Ellen Marks again, hoping that the inscription might provide further context. As she made her way back to the Historical Society, she felt a renewed sense of urgency. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the full picture remained obscured. The investigation was leading Sarah deeper into the town's hidden past, and she knew that understanding the full extent of the secret society's influence was crucial to solving the murders. With each new discovery, she felt the weight of her responsibility growing. The truth about Havenwood's dark history was within reach, and Sarah was determined to uncover it, no matter how deep the shadows of the past might be. Detective Sarah Lawson's discovery of the stone pedestal in the park was a breakthrough in her investigation. The inscription and symbol hinted at a deeper connection between the recent murders and Havenwood's shadowy past. Eager to learn more, Sarah returned to the Historical Society to consult with Dr. Ellen Marks. Dr. Marks examined the photographs of the pedestal with great interest. "This symbol is unmistakably linked to the secret society mentioned in the old records," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "It appears to be part of their ritualistic practices, but we need more information to fully understand its significance." Sarah nodded. "I agree. We need to find out if there are any specific references to this symbol in the Society's records or any related texts. Is there anything in the archives that might shed light on this?" Dr. Marks thought for a moment before responding. "There are a few more documents and old texts that might be useful. We haven't explored them thoroughly, but they might contain relevant information. I'll fetch them for you." As Dr. Marks retrieved the additional documents, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. The symbol on the pedestal, coupled with the historical records, suggested that the murders were part of a ritualistic pattern. Understanding the full scope of these rituals was crucial to solving the case. When Dr. Marks returned, she handed Sarah a stack of old papers and books. "Here are some texts that might be relevant. Take your time to review them. They contain references to various ceremonies and rites performed by the society." Sarah spent the next few hours poring over the documents. Among the texts, she found detailed descriptions of rituals that involved the very symbol she had seen. The rituals were said to be performed to invoke protection and prosperity, but they also had dark, sacrificial elements. The documents mentioned sacrifices made under specific lunar phases, aligning with the timing of the murders. One particular entry stood out. It described a ritual where the symbol was used to mark the chosen victims, who were then sacrificed as part of a ceremonial pact. The descriptions were chillingly detailed, and Sarah realized that the recent murders followed this very pattern. Determined to follow up on this lead, Sarah decided to investigate the lunar calendar to correlate the timing of the murders with the rituals described in the texts. She hoped that this would provide insight into the pattern and help identify the next potential target. Later that day, Sarah received a call from Officer James. "Detective Lawson, we found something unusual in Jason Miller's garage. There's a hidden compartment behind the workbench that wasn't noticed before. We've uncovered some documents and items that might be of interest." Sarah's pulse quickened. "I'll be right over." Upon arriving at the garage, Sarah examined the hidden compartment. Inside, she found several documents, including a journal belonging to Jason Miller. The journal detailed his concerns about the recent development projects in town and included sketches of the same symbol found at the murder scenes. The journal also mentioned a series of threatening messages Jason had received, hinting at pressure from someone who wanted to silence him. The final entry in the journal was particularly ominous, referring to an urgent need to uncover the truth before it's too late. Sarah felt a surge of urgency. It was clear that Jason had been on the brink of uncovering something significant, possibly related to the secret society's rituals and the murders. His journal might hold clues to identifying the perpetrators and preventing. With Jason Miller's journal providing critical insights, Detective Sarah Lawson felt a renewed sense of urgency. The detailed sketches of the symbol and the references to threats underscored the necessity of finding out who wanted Jason silenced and why. Armed with this new evidence, Sarah began to piece together the puzzle, hoping to connect the dots before another life was lost. Sarah's first step was to investigate the threatening messages Jason had received. She asked Officer James to track down the source of these messages, hoping to identify the sender and understand their motive. Meanwhile, Sarah returned to her office to review the journal's entries in more detail. As she pored over the journal, one particular entry caught her attention. It referred to a meeting that Jason had attended with several prominent figures in town, including Robert Greene. The entry described the meeting as tense, with heated arguments about the future of Havenwood and the proposed development projects. Sarah suspected that this meeting might have been pivotal. She needed to question Robert Greene about the details of this meeting and any potential conflicts with Jason Miller. She also decided to look into the other individuals mentioned in the journal, believing that they might hold crucial information. That afternoon, Sarah visited Robert Greene's office again. Greene greeted her with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "Detective Lawson, I didn't expect to see you so soon. What's the matter now?" "I'm following up on some new information," Sarah said firmly. "Jason Miller's journal mentioned a tense meeting involving you and other influential figures. Can you provide any details about what transpired during that meeting?" Greene's face darkened. "I don't see how that meeting is relevant. It was a business discussion, nothing more. Jason and I disagreed on the future of his property, but that's all there was to it." Sarah studied Greene's reaction carefully. His attempt to downplay the significance of the meeting only heightened her suspicions. Jason's journal suggests otherwise. He was clearly concerned about the nature of that meeting and the threats he received afterward. Can you explain why he might have felt threatened? Greene's demeanor shifted, and he appeared increasingly agitated. "Detective, I've already told you everything I know. If Jason was receiving threats, it wasn't from me. My focus is on business, and I have no interest in resorting to violence." Frustrated but not deterred, Sarah left Greene's office and began to follow up on the other individuals mentioned in Jason's journal. She reached out to several local figures, including community leaders and business owners, who had attended the meeting. Their accounts varied, but a common thread emerged. They all seemed to be guarded about their knowledge of the meeting's details. One individual, a local historian named Margaret Collins, appeared more open to discussing the matter. When Sarah met her at her quaint bookshop, Margaret was visibly troubled by the recent events. "Detective Lawson, I've heard about the murders. It's unsettling to say the least. Jason Miller was a good man. If he had concerns, I'm sure they were valid." Margaret revealed that the meeting had indeed been fraught with tension, primarily due to disagreements over land development and historical preservation. Jason had argued passionately against certain projects, which had put him at odds with several influential figures, including Robert Greene. Margaret also mentioned that there had been whispers of a secret faction within the town that opposed Jason's stance. This faction, she said, was rumored to have connections to the old society mentioned in the historical records. Sarah's mind raced as she absorbed this new information. It seemed that Jason's opposition to the development projects had put him in direct conflict with powerful individuals who might have had motives for violence. the connection between the old society, the secret. The investigation was gaining momentum, but Detective Sarah Lawson felt the weight of her responsibility intensifying. The connections between the murders, the secret society, and the influential figures in Havenwood were becoming clearer. But a crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing. Sarah knew that to solve the case, she needed to uncover the full extent of the rituals and their significance. Sarah decided to revisit the Historical Society with Dr. Ellen Marks to delve deeper into the secret society's practices. The old texts and records had hinted at a specific ritual that might explain the recent murders. Dr. Marks led Sarah to a hidden compartment in the archives that contained additional manuscripts and rare books. These texts might contain more detailed descriptions of the rituals performed by the society, Dr. Marks explained. They're not often consulted, but they could provide the final pieces of the puzzle. Sarah carefully examined the texts. One manuscript, in particular, described a ritual known as the Ceremony of Shadows, which involved the marking and sacrifice of individuals to ensure the society's power and control over the town. The text detailed how the victims were chosen based on their opposition to the society's goals, aligning with the pattern of the recent murders. The manuscript mentioned that the ceremony was performed during specific lunar phases, which corresponded to the timing of the murders. The ritual also required a ceremonial object, the same symbol found at the crime scenes. This symbol was used to mark the victims and signify their role in the ritual. Sarah's heart raced as she pieced together the information. The ritualistic elements described in the text matched the evidence found at the crime scenes and in Jason Miller's journal. It became clear that the murders were not just random acts of violence, but part of a larger, sinister plan, orchestrated by those seeking to revive or uphold the society's dark practices. Armed with this new understanding, Sarah decided it was time to confront Robert Greene once more. She needed to press him on the details of the ritual and his possible involvement. With the evidence pointing directly at him and his connections to the secret society, Sarah felt confident that Greene held crucial information. When Sarah arrived at Greene's office, she found him in a visibly tense state. "Detective Lawson, what brings you here now?" Greene asked, trying to mask his anxiety. "I have new evidence about the rituals and their connection to the murders," Sarah replied. The texts describe a specific ceremony that aligns with the timing and symbols found at the crime scenes. Your family's connection to the secret society is undeniable. It's time to come clean. Greene's expression hardened, and he looked away. "Detective, you don't understand the complexities of this situation. My family has been involved in many things, but we're not the ones committing these crimes." Sarah pressed further. "The evidence suggests otherwise. The rituals described in the texts match the patterns of the murders." The tension in Robert Greene's office was palpable as Detective Sarah Lawson confronted him with the evidence linking his family to the murders. Greene's reluctance to speak had shifted into a troubled resolve, suggesting that he knew more than he was initially willing to admit. "There are things about my family's past that are best left buried," Greene began, his voice heavy with resignation. "The secret society was involved in many dark practices, but I assure you, I am not a part of any ongoing rituals. What's happening now is beyond my control." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You need to tell me everything you know. The evidence points to a continuation of these dark practices. If there's something you're hiding, it could be crucial to stopping the next murder." Greene took a deep breath and reluctantly began to reveal the truth. "Years ago, my family was deeply involved in the society's activities, but we've distanced ourselves from those practices. What you're seeing now, it's a faction that's trying to revive the old rituals. They believe that by continuing these ceremonies, they can reclaim their lost power and influence." Sarah listened intently. "Who is leading this faction? Where can I find them?" Greene's face was pale. "I don't know the exact identities, but I've heard whispers about a secret meeting place, a location tied to the old society's rituals. It's rumored to be hidden in the abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town." Armed with this new lead, Sarah thanked Greene and immediately set out for the mansion. The imposing structure had long been a symbol of the town's forgotten past, and its eerie presence had always been shrouded in mystery. As Sarah approached, she felt a shiver run down her spine. The mansion's grand entrance was weathered and decrepit, but Sarah pushed the heavy doors open with determination. The interior was dark and dusty, with only the moonlight filtering through broken windows. She cautiously made her way through the mansion, searching for any signs of recent activity. In one of the rooms, Sarah found a set of stairs leading to a hidden basement. The basement was dimly lit by flickering candles, and the air was thick with the scent of old incense. The walls were adorned with symbols and ritualistic markings that matched those from the crime scenes. As Sarah descended further into the basement, she heard murmurs and the faint sound of chanting. She carefully approached the source of the noise and peered around a corner to see a group of individuals gathered around an altar. They were dressed in dark robes, performing what appeared to be a ritual. Sarah's heart raced as she recognized the symbols and items used in the ceremony. It was clear that this was the group responsible for the murders, trying to complete their ritualistic plans. She reached for her radio to call for backup, but knew she had to act quickly to prevent the ritual from being completed. Just as she was about to make her presence known, one of the robed figures noticed her. The group immediately fell into a frenzy, and chaos erupted in the basement. Sarah tried to subdue the individuals as they attempted to escape or defend their actions. In the ensuing struggle, Sarah managed to apprehend several of the key figures and disrupt the ritual. The remaining members fled, leaving behind evidence of their dark practices. As the authorities arrived to secure the scene, Sarah felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The group's attempt to resurrect their dark rituals had been thwarted, and their connection to the murders had been exposed. Back at the station, Sarah reviewed the evidence and prepared her reports. The case had been complex and fraught with danger, but she had uncovered the truth behind the murders and the secret society's revival attempts. The town of Havenwood would begin to heal from the shadows of its past, and Sarah Lawson's relentless pursuit of justice had brought a measure of peace. As she reflected on the case, Sarah knew that the darkness of Havenwood's history would linger. But the truth had been revealed, and the perpetrators had been brought to justice. The town could now move forward, free from the grip of the past that had haunted it for so long.